Hi everyone, my name is Sunil Kapoor and welcome you at Expertise Station. Today's topic is supply chain and supply chain management. So let's get started. So we'll start with supply chain. Every business, whether it is a product or a service based, has a supply chain. So what is supply chain actually? So supply chain is nothing but a flow where uh, raw material, information, or money goes to one level to another level and another level to the another level. So that's called supply chain. In this case, we'll see there is a manufacturer who buying component or raw material from his supplier. That's called tier one. And then the producer is doing some value addition and finally uh, selling it to the final customer. There might be various party involved in between, but this is in general called supply chain. There are a few example called global example called Walmart, Boeing, Indian examples called let's say Maruti Suzuki, Patanjali, Tata Motors, Flipkart, Amazon. So every business which delivering product or service has to go through the supply chain processes. So when we go a little deeper in the processes, like when we design the entire process flow, we do planning, demand planning, forecast planning, based on the market, based on the data, sales data. And then when we start doing day-to-day executions and doing the complete monitoring through multiple systems, ERP or softwares, then when we go managing entire designing, planning, execution, and monitoring, that's called supply chain management basically. We'll try to understand this with multiple examples. So, for example, let's say you're wearing a shirt or a trouser, which is manufactured by a company, but this company have lots of supplier in the back end. So they might be getting a fabric from a supplier, they might be getting chain from a different supplier or buttons from a different supplier, and then they're stitching it and finally sending it to the retailer distributor, and then you buying it from a shop or a shopping mall or a retail outlet. Similarly, let's see a food processing company, let's say Patanjali in our case. So Patanjali produce some juices for that, or some packed food. For that, they're buying some sugar from their suppliers. Then they process it, processing some juice, and then it goes to the consumer through retailer. Similarly, for cars or aircraft, uh, there are supplier who supplying to electronics component or mechanical component which are used in assembly, and then finally uh, end user, maybe the car user are driving the cars, or in case of plane, you are using their services by flying one place to another place. So these all are BOM components. So what is BOM? Bill of material, which directly goes into the product called BOM material. There are some utilities or services which are not directly impacting or goes to the product, but they are essential for producing or moving product from one place to another place. For example, electricity, a very good example, where every manufacturing plant or let's say service company need electricity to run their factories, to run their offices, to run their machines, laptops. Similarly, when in terms of service, like one person is go from one place to another place by using some kind of transportation. Similarly, a material goes to one supplier to the producer. Producer goes from producer, it goes to the consumers. So these are called transportation services, logistic services. So I believe this has been clear to you, like how the entire supply chain and supply chain management works. Uh, Now we'll see how is the value creation and balance in supply chain. You know, uh, earlier supply chain was managed and focused primarily on the cost reduction, but today it is not about just reducing the cost, but it is also to improve the overall product and which give you a better product on the lower price and reducing the entire overall supply chain from buying from a component to delivering it to the end customer. And there are multiple stakeholder involved in between, which starting from supplier, manufacturer, investors, government, distributors, and end customers. So this entire process called supply chain and supply chain management. Basically, there are two type of supply chain. One is vertical, another is horizontal. So, very good example for vertical integration, which is majorly the centralized one. So, like a paper company, so they do reverse integration. So they buy, they have their own forest, and then from the forest, which is working them as a raw material supplier. Then they have machining, if of course their production facility, they process the paper and then finally sending it to the distributor and distributor to the retailer. So they control the overall supply chain over here, starting from having the forest processing and delivering. So this is called centralized or vertical integrations, where you have all the controls within yourself for managing the entire supply chain management. Few drawbacks about this is very difficult to manage and so much expensive, because you are managing your suppliers, your in terms of everything which you could buy from the supplier, you have to manage by your own, and therefore you have to put lots of capital. The benefit is, since you know what kind of quality or what kind of material you are buying internally, so you have a good quality control over here. And so overall product quality is very, very good. And of course, you see overall a lean supply chain over here, where you have a better pricing as well. Another example or another type is horizontal integrations. So we also called it lateral. So this could be seen through, let's say, car manufacturer, or we are using Philips over here. Uh, let's say Ford, Ford who's producing cars. They buying component from different suppliers, and then they assemble it, and then they finally selling it the product to the market. Similarly, Philips, let's say they produce lights or home appliances, and then they are using a third party logistic to manage the warehouses and logistics. So if you see both the example, in case of Ford, Ford do not have to spend lots of money for the component produce or procure the raw material. So basically, they have a tier one supplier who are supplying to component to Ford, and Ford then manufacturing the cars and supplying to the final customer through distributor and dealer network. And similarly, Philips, let's say for the lighting example, he is buying plastic from a supplier, bulb from different supplier, or LEDs from a different suppliers, and then they do final assembly. And of course, the logistics is also third party, managed by third party. So if you see, there is a overall better focus on the product quality, which is our forte. And then you'll see you don't have to invest so much on the supply chain or managing the raw material supplies. And the drawback is less control, because the supplier is driven by their own processes. But if you see, the less control on quality is not valid in today's scenario, because the entire process has been changed And there are lots of quality programs. There are lots of improvement which tier 1, tier 2 is following nowadays. So if you see in the most of the cases, we'll see the horizontal integration is available most of the manufacturing company. Now, when we see there are four different flow in the entire supply chain. One is, of course, the information flow, which is basically the first flow. So the producer gives some forecast to the supplier that what kind of component he is going to buy, what kind of fabric he is going to buy, what kind of raw material he is going to buy from his supplier, daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis. So this is the information which goes from producer to the supplier, and of course, producer have some background for this information. For example, a car manufacturer know that uh, what how many car they are selling every month, and they have history of a couple of years, like basically in festival season, cars buyers are more compared to, let's say, uh, first quarter of any calendar year. Then we will see the material flow. So material flow is actually go from supplier sending a raw material to the producer, and producer produce it or adding value to this component or material, and then finally supplying to the final customer. Money flow go from reverse, like end customer is paying to the producer, producer is paying to the raw material supplier. And then, of course, reverse flow, which include the recycling, repair, or disposal of the component, which is also again go into the reverse flow. So end user is, of course, giving back to the manufacturer through some vendor in between, and then maybe some component goes back to the raw material supplier, or most of the cases it is OEM responsibility to dispose the component correctly. So this is the flow in the supply chain. And let's try to understand a very layman example, which will be easy for you to understand how the supply chain work. Everyone has experience of buying some or eating some food from the street vendor. So here, let's say the street vendor is uh, doing some food processing. Let's say he's selling some burgers. So for him, the the supplier would be who's supplying to bun to the producer, and let's say some vegetables he's buying from market. So in this case, these are the supplier, and then producer is, let's say, they are processing it, and then finally selling it to the customer, uh, which is in the local case. So let's say, but apart from the ingredients, he's also using some services which include water, which supplies from the government, electricity, of course. He or she have some component or some machines which he used to process the food, or let's say wood, food stalls, cooking utensils, which he is using for, or he or she is using for serving the food. So this is how you see this, the entire flow, starting from buying vegetable, processing it, and selling it to the customer. This entire flow is called supply chain and supply chain management. So the key takeaway from today's lesson is universal presence. So every product or service passes through a supply chain. So you can't imagine any process, any business which do not have the supply chain. Starting from a very complex, we have seen Boeing example, and to a very common example of producing a burger. Value creation, supply chain is all about creating the value for all the stakeholders, not just cutting the cost. And then integration balance, choose between vertical and horizontal integration. So you depend on the business and depend on what kind of uh, controls you want. Then we have seen multiple flows, starting from information, then material, money, and reverse logistics. And beyond manufacturing, both manufacturing and services industry rely on effectively supply chain management. So this is all about today's topic. I hope it will help you to understand about supply chain and supply chain management. Do let us know what topic you want us to cover in the next video, and do not share the video with someone who really need this kind of information. Thank you.
Thank you for watching us. Please like, share, and subscribe the Expertise Station channel.